Experiences in my life. When I was about 6 or 7, I was in the back of my house alone while the rest of my family members were in the living room, and I was sitting on my sister's bed, and I was waiting for her to come back to her room and play with me. So I was sitting on the bed when I saw a figure dart through the hallway. Thinking it was her, I called her name and went to where it had hid, and there was nothing. Being a kid, I didn't think more of it. When I was 10, my granddad died in his house. A little while after, maybe a month or two, me and my 2 sisters and mother were in the house. They were walking about the house while I sat in the middle of the living room where my granddad often was. Well, I was sitting on the floor when my sisters/mom walked past me, and they were headed for the back room. Just as I was about to get up, a chair started rocking out of control. I then called my sister's name, and just as she peered into the room, the chair stopped. It didn't bother me at all though. My oldest sister, not the one in my previous story, had mental problems during the time my granddad had passed, and she often hurt herself, so I and my mother believed that she was attracting evil spirits into her bedroom. Often while we were all at school and my father was at work, my mom was alone at our home and would see dark figures walk into my sister's room, which I soon figured out on my own. I started to hear voices in my room, which was next to my sister's room, and they would whisper stuff I couldn't understand. Soon after this, I would sleep with my other sister every night, but I did sleep with my oldest sister a couple of times. One night I slept with her and she began to hug me in her sleep, so being annoyed and being pretty much asleep, I went back to my room and fell back asleep. The next morning she told me she woke up wondering where I had gone, and she felt someone sit on the bed, and thinking it was me, she turned to see no one. My sister is now married and has moved out, and we no longer experience these dark figures or whispering voices. Now, about when I was 13, I saw a man only his shoulders up, and he waved at me. This was while I was trying to go to sleep. Not being frightened, I waved back and fell asleep. Flash forward to now, I occasionally hear voices, and my mom has heard my voice calling her while I wasn't even home. She has also heard her name being called. That's all. Thanks for reading. The Woman Who Wouldn't Leave. When I was 10 years old, I was staying the night at my uncle and aunt's house. It was a beautiful old country house that dated back to the 1800s, which in Australia is very old. I was trying to get to sleep, and my younger brother was already dead to the world. Suddenly, though, I began to feel uneasy. I opened my eyes and saw a very solid-looking, very old woman standing at the door. She was staring at me. I was absolutely terrified. The closest neighbor was acres away, and the oldest person in the house was 45. So I covered my head with a blanket, praying that she'd leave. I must have fallen asleep, because when I lifted the blanket it was morning and all was well again. Still shaken, I quietly told my aunt what had happened so I didn't have to sleep in that room again. My aunt didn't laugh it off. She went very quiet. She told me about the woman who had lived in the house before them. She had been the youngest daughter of the original owner of the house. She was born there and she died there. Then my aunt told me her own story about that room, which was a part of the original house. When my cousin was a baby, that was his room. My aunt had laid him in his cradle for a nap, before moving into the kitchen to do the dishes. However, when she turned off the tap, she heard the faint voice of a woman singing. Curious and not yet alarmed, my aunt walked just outside the door of my cousin's room. The singing continued. Suddenly frightened, realizing she was the only adult in the house, my aunt opened the door. The singing abruptly stopped. My cousin was wide awake and smiling upwards. My aunt, shaken, took my cousin out of the room and avoided it for the rest of the day. Now, years and years later, I look back and wonder if it was just the overly active imagination of a child. But I don't think it was. I get chills, even in the stifling heat of summer, when I enter that room. I don't like to have my back to the door. It makes me feel uneasy when I walk by it, especially at night. My aunt's experience was more benign, but equally as unsettling as mine. That woman, who was born in that house and died in it. I honestly don't think she ever left.